Before we start our episode today, I wanted to let you know that it's March, and in the spirit of this month, Dr. Kuba and I have gone mad. We have actually added a whole new section to our monthly digest, which you can get through becoming a subscriber. We have added a section called Sweet Sally's Solutions, and this is meant for your team to help you digest the digest. So there's a whole section of tips and actions for them to take. You do not want to miss this. This is a super practical section of the digest. I know it's going to be super helpful for everybody. So don't hesitate. Click the subscribe button in the show notes below and become a member. We can't wait to have you join.
Hey lady, how are you doing?
Hey, good. I can't complain.
Okay, well, you're not going to like me very much, so I wish you hadn't said you can't complain, because I'm about to give you something to complain about, and that would be me.
Are you telling me I can complain here in the next 2 minutes?
Well, you're just not going to like me very much. You're going to have to be complaining about me, because I'm not countering you at all, because obviously I do agree with you, but the look on your face, you're like, yes ma'am, go ahead.
No buts allowed.
Well, I don't know what to say. Other than, I believe in compensation reviews, because
yes.
they've been so helpful in the office, and I think we've done a few podcasts on the importance of it and all of that. And I do see the importance. However, if I'm to play devil's advocate here for a moment, we just did ours.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it made me go, God, I really don't know that I loved that. And I guess in my mind, I was all like gung-ho, like comp reviews are so good and all this good information comes out of it. But when we were done, I was like, I just felt like a deflated balloon. And it took me a minute to kind of go, no, it was good. It was. So again, I'm not trying to counter you, and because it would be countering myself, because I do know overall it was good that we did them, and they were important. But if I may just kind of, I guess what I want out of this podcast is to maybe set an expectation, or
I love that.
Okay.
I think that's
You're not going to kick me out of the booth here.
Get out. Moving on.
Yes.
No, I think it's good because there is an emotional aftermath that can happen with compensation reviews, particularly with the practice owner. Because I think you harness up so much emotional energy going into those. I mean, the amount of prep time that's gone into that, the stress and the dread of it, and there can be this emotional either reaction to it or even like an emotional letdown to it. Like, I put all this work in. I wish that I would have gotten X, Y, and Z out of it. So
that's exactly how I felt. And I think I'd forgotten that. Well, and I'll tell you the two reasons that I can think of. One, because I was so gung-ho about, because we were putting stuff together for the digest, and I was like, this is great, and look at all this great material and all this. And so in my mind, it was like, rah, this is the best thing ever. And then we did them, and I was like, ugh. And it wasn't like I was run over by a truck. Like, it wasn't that bad, but it was just kind of this, I won't say icky feeling, but it was just kind of like, is that what I wanted and needed out of this? And so I was just surprised at my own reaction, because it was so like, this is awesome. And then by the time we were done, I was like, was that awesome? And and I think the other moment that I'd kind of forgotten about that came back full circle, there's one team member that I always skip her compensation review. And so that was my plan again this year, was just to skip it and let you handle that one. And you said to me that last year she was like, oh, is Kuba skipping mine again? Does she not like me? Why doesn't she want to be in here on mine?
Right.
And I was like, what? So should I talk a little bit about that? Or
so let me first say that part of, I think, why you might have had an emotional letdown too, is most people don't go into these with a rah, yes, let's tackle. So I think you started at a real high and then came back down to reality.
And there was no way we were going to meet that high. Like, it's not meant to be a high.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So I just wanted to mention that, because most people aren't like, yeah, let's tackle this. And I think you were, which you normally aren't.
Yeah. Normally I'm not.
Normally you're like, do we have to? And I feel like I'm like dragging you to the compensation reviews. And then it turns out better than you expected. So it might have been the inverse happened this time, that you walked in after all this energy and time and thought that you've put into these, you know, through the podcast and subscription and all that you were starting higher than you typically do.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better because, yeah, I just think I was done with that and I was like, oh God, like we just like went rah, 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 like do these reviews. And I was like, that was not really that much fun. And I mean, again, it wasn't awful. No. So if we could just kind of get into some of the things that maybe I experienced, and just so that people who do these reviews do know that they are important, but then maybe not have, I guess I just want to talk about different things that can happen afterwards. And so I don't want our listeners to be left like on this cliffhanger going, okay, I did them, but now what?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk through kind of some of the now what possibilities.
Yes. And also for people to set their expectations appropriately, which when you talk through,
I guess, yeah.
Well, and when you talk through some of these examples, I think it will help people to set their expectations appropriately.
Okay, that's true. And I think, well, I'm going to go back and say, even like when we talk about personalities and knowing your team. Yep. So if this is the first time you've done this, or you don't really know your team very well because they're new or whatever, like this might just be ready for, you know, kind of any response is fair game, mm-hmm. and any feeling you have is fair game, and take that and kind of go with it, I guess. So I may just start with the one that I always avoid.
I think that'd be a good one.
And I avoid it not because I don't like her at all, but she is my smartest, most strategic person on the team. And so I will say, like, even when we have like production goals or new patient goals or whatever it is, the rest of the team is like, yeah, we'd love to do that. But most are not driven by it. Like, they're gonna do a great job regardless of if there was a goal to hit or not. Yes. Or conversely, I guess, do a crappy job if they were, you know, like the it's not a huge sway one way or the other. This one's different. She watches all the numbers. She's very strategic, even down to where we had, at one point, we had a bonus system where it was like, if it was a 2-doctor day, so there was myself and an associate there, then the production goal was higher. And then if it was a 1-doctor day, the production goal was lower, which, you know, makes common sense, like whatever. Well, if it was a day, like say in February or April, where it's typically slow in our office, she would like be like, oh, Kuba, you stay home. And I'm like, what? And she's like, no, I'm moving the Kuba only patients. You don't need to come in. And I was like, why is she suddenly like micromanaging my schedule? She's never done that before. And you were the one who pointed out, and you're like, well, because she knows if there's 2 doctors, there's no prayer of hitting goal that day because it's a day in February. It's not that busy. So she's trying to be as strategic as she can, which, you know, props to you, you know, like anything. There can be some pluses to it, and then other times you're like, girl, get off my back, you know what I mean? But other times you're like, I'm glad somebody's paying attention and somebody's trying to hit these goals and somebody's trying to work in patients and stuff like that. So it's, you know, like everything else, there's a plus and minus to it. So anyway, so she's my person who is very, she's not words of affirmation at all. You know, she couldn't care less about words of affirmation. She's more like, you know, she's driven by the production, and she's, anyway. So for me, I've always been like, I don't like that because I'm a McFeelerson. And so to me, where I'm sitting there going, you know, we have this benefit and we offer 401k match and we offer blah, 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 where in my opinion, I don't think I mean, unless you're corporate, that's separate. But if you're a private mom and pop like me, like a small office, you really can't afford to do a lot of that. And we've done everything we can to try to make that happen, which means I go home with a smaller paycheck, which I'm okay with because I'd rather have team members with the longevity and all of that. So whatever. Anyway, in my mind, she's one that I know sitting there and me going, hey, look what we were able to add this year. And her typical response would be something like, oh, well, yeah, my friend's office offers that. Or, oh yeah, you know, you had said we were going to get that 2 years ago. And so like, I view that as a negative attitude, as a no gratitude, more, I need more, and never, whatever I do is never enough. That's not how she means it. And it took me a while to, because I'm such a feely, it took me a while to go, that's not where she's coming from. She's just a strategic person.
Yeah, and she feels like she's stating obvious facts. Like, it's not like arguing with you about the value of those. She's just like, yeah, but. And you're coming at it from, I'm so proud of all these things. And she's coming at it from a very factual and strategic, yes, that's great, but how far else can I push this? How much more can I get? And that doesn't jive well with the feelings you're bringing into the conversation.
Right, because to me, I'm like, okay, nothing I do is ever good enough. Like, forget it. I'm taking this back, because you're not going to be happy anyway. And so I've come a long way. Like, honestly, even just hearing you say that, I'm like, yeah, it makes me angry all over again. Like, this person's never going to be happy. And then I've got to remember the positives and remember not to take it personally. But for somebody like me, that's very difficult not to take it personally. So how I handled that then was, I'm just going to skip these meetings, because I just know that I'm going to be pissed when I leave, and she's not been grateful, in my opinion. Yeah. And, whatever strategic thing she comes back with, I don't want to be defensive or tacky or mean about it. So I would just let you handle it, because you always have the right way to counter her. And so this year, again, that was going to be my plan. And so, but you said, well, last year she was kind of asking where you were. And I'm like, oh, honey, is this a good thing for either one of us to be there? But then I was like, okay, put your big girl panties on and just manage my expectation, which is what you said a few minutes ago. Like, just get ready. We know she's going to have those questions, and I know I'm going to not feel great after hers. And I even made hers go first. Yeah. Which normally I wait till the end so that I can get out of there and leave on a high note. But I was like, no, get hers over with. And so that's what we did this year.
And to me, this is a very real example of something that a practice owner or manager needs to be prepared for. No matter the compensation package that you've put together, there's a lot of, I just have such a heart for the practice owners, because I know when they've put together a really competitive package, it's costing them something. They're sacrificing something to make that possible. And so I totally feel it from your side, because there's a lot of emotion. Like, you could take all that away and make a lot more money on any given year. And you choose instead to make it a career type practice where people can stay and all of their needs are provided for. So I understand the emotion of it, but ultimately we can't bring the expectation in that we're going to show these numbers, we're going to show this package, and the team member's going to be like, oh, thank you. Probably not going to happen. Every once in a while it does, but a lot of times it does not happen that way. So I think that's one area that we've really got to make ourselves aware of, being aware of our own emotions and our own expectations when we step into those meetings.
And that can be hard, because I find myself going, what are you thinking? Like, for the person, like, as they're, however they're responding, like, I'm going, my programmed nature, because I'm a people pleaser, is, oh, you're disappointed. It wasn't enough. It wasn't what you're thinking. Now you're going to leave. And
you feel pressure by that.
Yes. And I very much feel like, well, maybe we could have all been flying under the radar and no news is good news and bury my head and everybody's fine. But now I chose to have this compensation review, bring it to a head and go, hey, here's what I do for you. And now you didn't say anything. So that clearly means that you're not happy with what I'm doing. And I think, I've had to come a long way from that to go, okay, that's not what they're thinking. Quit putting ideas in their head, or words in their mouth that they didn't say. And even if she's asking for more, I don't think she's trying to squeeze you like a lemon. And I think that's how I felt for a long time.
Yeah, she's being a strategic career person that's wanting to see how much more she can get out of this job that she puts time and energy into. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just happens to come to head. in these compensation reviews.
And you say there's nothing wrong with that, and I agree, and that's why I'm so glad you're there to be the buffer, because listening to how you handle some of the way that you ask these questions, I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't an inflammatory question, you're just asking. I wonder if some of it too, just based off of, one, being a woman, two, from a culture standpoint where you just kind of defer to the person in charge, like at least from my cultural standpoint, that's often the thing. So I think that for me too, some of it was just kind of going, okay, but from this person's culture, there's nothing wrong with asking.
Right.
You should ask. But in my culture, we would have never asked. That's not a respectful thing to do.
That's a good point. Yep.
So I think it took me a minute to get over that as well. And not that I'm over it, honestly, it's still very odd and awkward to me. But it's still, I recognize now where that's coming from. And that has helped a lot for me, not abandoning the practice altogether, the practice of doing compensation reviews altogether, because I didn't like how it felt afterwards.
Right. And I think it goes back to setting your expectations accordingly. Like, you knowing that that's how this one person is in the reviews. Again, yes, ducking out of that from time to time to kind of go, I don't think I can handle that appropriately. But then also, when you stepped into this one, making sure that you know that you're not going to get sunshine and rainbows from this person. You're not going to get, I so appreciate this package, and wow, I'm so excited looking at these numbers and the growth that I've had. Just knowing to set, based on the employees that you're going to be meeting with, set your expectations accordingly. And don't hope for an outcome that they can't produce, because that's where it becomes unfair. And also, we shouldn't necessarily be stepping into that for affirmation. We're stepping into those meetings to have a very logical, practical, here's your growth, here was last year, here was this year. We are happy with that. From a leadership standpoint, that's what we were wanting. We've achieved our goals for you. Are you achieving your goals? How do you feel about these? So it's meant to be very numbers and factual, and not feeling, to be perfectly honest.
And that, I think that was my number one thing, was I was so pleased with all the things we were able to offer. I think I was looking for that affirmation and going, okay, like, I've got a cool practice, right? Like, are you happy working here? And then my expectation was, they're like, yeah, this is great. And then to not get that, and I was like, oh, they hate me, I hate them, I hate, I was just like, this is like, focus here, like, get your head back in the game. And so what you just said, where you said their growth, and so can we be a little more specific about that? Like, one thing that you point out to them is saying, well, this is what you made last year, this is what you made this year. And there's some people that stayed exactly the same, but you were able to kind of point out, and I want to say 100% of the time it was they worked less hours, things like that. So I think when you were able to say, well, if you work a normal set of hours, oh yes, Sally, you had your knee surgery, remember you were out for 4 weeks for that, and whatever it is, and then you're able to, and truly, I don't think this year we had anybody who was like less than last year, but if they are, well, isn't that a great point to talk? And part of me went, maybe this isn't a great point. Did I just point out to them that they did worse this year than they did last year, and they wouldn't have noticed that? But then I'm like, but they may have noticed that. I don't know what they notice and don't notice, but I think any person wants to be on a track of progressing. And so even if I am the one who pointed that out and they were clueless about it, it's still like, at some point it's going to hit them.
Yes.
And don't they want to grow as a person, as an employee? Yeah. And honestly, if the answer to that is no, then do I want them on my team?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I've got to think about that. But so moving on to a different employee, I've got another employee that she very much seems like the type who does not pay attention to her pay stub, does not pay attention to, like, she's just this like beautiful soul who comes into work to give her best. Like, that's just, she just radiates joy, and just very, very emotionally intelligent for her age. And so I think with her, like, it's really funny watching her in these. And she's another one because she's so positive and joyful. I think last year, the year before, she caught me off guard because I was waiting for sunshine and rainbows even in that meeting.
Yeah.
Because that's how she is generally. And she was very quiet and was like, oh, okay, and that was that. And I was like, oh my God, what did we just do there? Like, she, and it took me a minute to go, I don't know that she really cares or really understands these numbers. As long as she's happy with the work that she's doing and she's able to meet the needs of these patients and these patients love her, like, that's her love language. That's what's filling her bowl. Now, of course, like, if we showed her numbers and was like, you went downhill, I'm sure she'd be like, huh? But I don't know that it would really make that much of a difference to her, strategic wise or goal planning wise. I think she's just one of these happy people that floats through life because she's happy, and she's gonna figure I don't see her not being happy with whatever circumstance she's hit with. But that was another one for me to go, I was expecting her to be like, oh, cool, oh yeah, and she's just very much and to where now I'm like, does she even understand what we're showing her, or telling her the impact of this, or how she can affect? And I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah.
But again, the point being just managing my expectations, because years prior, I thought I had upset her.
Yeah.
And I think that's just her not wanting to look dumb in front of us. Honestly, if I look back at it now, I don't think she wants to look dumb in front of us and didn't want to ask or question anything. So she just nods her head and says,
Because some people just aren't, they struggle with numbers, or that's not, like you said, that's not their primary motivation. They care more about the office culture and performance. How are they doing? Are they liked and appreciated on the team? And so it doesn't mean that we eliminate them from this compensation review. It just may mean that, again, we're not expecting anything out of them. It's still good information to have, and for this particular person, because it's such a commonplace occurrence in the practice that every year we sit down and do this, while we may not get anything out of her in that meeting, in that compensation review, it sets the tone that we're always willing to talk about this, and that we want to help you achieve your financial goals, to the point that last year, not in 2025, earlier in 2024, she approached me and said, hey, I do need to, some life circumstances have changed. I really need to be able to earn some more. Can I work some more hours? And here's my plan for that. I think I could do this, this, and this. And it does make you wonder, would there have been a comfort level without those compensation reviews? I don't think there would be.
I don't think there would be either.
But because we're so open and transparent and making sure, what we always say to everybody in those compensation reviews is, hey, looking at this, you've achieved what we wanted, which was financial growth for you this year. But are you achieving what you want to achieve? Are there any goals that you want to talk about? And so, like, this lady hasn't ever said anything in the compensation reviews related to that. But the lines of communication are open, and now she feels comfortable bringing stuff like that up. So even if you don't get an immediate tangible result in the meeting or right after the meeting, it creates a comfort level that I think is really important.
I think the other thing, that if nothing else, like, even if they're not thinking strategy, like, you've got some that have strategy, then you've got others that they're like, okay, I'm just coming to work, like, I don't know what you're talking about right now. Honestly, that would be me if I was one of the employees, because I'm not driven by the numbers and by my growth. I'm more going to be the feeler, just like them, going, well, do I enjoy coming here? That's my barometer of, that's my gauge of, do I want to keep working here or not? Do I have more positive, happy days than I have negative, tough days? Am I liked here? Am I appreciated here? So a compensation review, if I was on the other chair, if you will, going through this, I think I too would be like, okay, good. I mean, I'm glad I got some benefits, great, but that's not why I'm here. But I think even for people like that, it's still good for them to see and hear that we are strategic. Like, we're not just, because I think day by day, we're not like going, okay, well, the strategy for now is this. It's like we're focused on patient care. But when they see this, they see that we are working on other things more globally for the health of the practice, which means job security. And so I think if nothing else, everybody gets a vibe and sense of that.
Yes. And again, that's one of those things that there's not necessarily anything feel good about that. It's very factual in nature. But in every single review, we were able to say, because you and I focus a lot on creating a really robust and rewarding bonus program, because we realize how intricately that's tied to not only pay, but also to the practice success. Those go hand in hand. And so we were able to say, hey, look at last year's bonus. When we did this last year, Dr. Kuba and I weren't satisfied with those amounts. So we played around with it, and this is what we came up with for one goal: more bonus money. And look, we are so glad that that strategy worked. And here you can see the new bonus numbers. So even taking strategy beyond like practice strategy and going, we've got strategy. We're thinking about your pay probably more than you are.
Yeah.
And are trying to make this a success for you. And again, sometimes we walk a fine line of let's not overly brag about that. Like we're looking for accolades or appreciation. It shouldn't be set up to be like, tell me how much you love me, or tell me how much you appreciate that I do that. Which is why I kind of jump in these conversations and I go over the data, because I'm going to approach it very just matter of factly. This is what we did. Here's a comparison to last year. Here's this. And so it's not feely at all. I'm not usually a feely communicator. And so the way that we set this up, I think, works really well, because the factual person, the data person, is going over the facts and going over the data. And then I can say things so that they know the strategy is there, like the bonus change. Whereas if it's you who's more feeling, you might communicate with more like, hey, we want to make sure you know that we do this and we do that, and you're looking for something maybe even without even knowing it, or the employee may feel pressured then because the boss is saying this rather than this neutral consultant. So I think also setting your expectations clearly so that you're communicating in ways that the employee doesn't feel obligated to compliment, but then also you are throwing in the strategy so that the employee picks up on that.
Well, and I think that is very valuable if you didn't have an increase. You know what I mean? Like if the employee's going, wait a minute, we bonused more last year than this year, and so what happened here? But at least if you are the one to point out and say, we are noticing this trend, and this is the strategy, so this is how we're planning on tweaking the strategy, or maybe, whatever happened this year, the cost of supplies and the tariffs and everything has put this over the edge, but we are thinking about it and we are watching it, and this is a number that we weren't particularly happy with, so we're going to work here. What are your thoughts on how we can get this bonus number up? What are your thoughts on how we can increase new patients this month? And it becomes a strategic conversation that they're also brought into.
Yes.
So I think that's the other benefit. Even if the number isn't what you or they had hoped to see, well, now it's a conversation. It's just, don't make it my problem. If you didn't get the compensation you wanted, well, what are we doing to fix that?
Correct.
Did we come in and work the number of hours we should have? Okay, let's assume the answer to that is yes. Okay, well, did we get on the phone and try to schedule overdue recare patients? Did we go out and market? Did we, what are we doing to get this number up? And I think that's what we've talked about before, is the benefit of the compensation reviews to begin with. And it's
interesting so thinking of an example that's not tied to your team, it gives us a factual ground to talk about if somebody went backwards in pay or didn't grow in their compensation. There are times that they have chosen flexibility over compensation. So this goes back to setting expectations appropriately. We need to be prepared for that to be an uncomfortable part of the conversation. When we're comparing to last year and they actually went down in compensation, we need to know that there's nothing fun about that. But we've got to be able to bring to light why, which is where those hours worked come into play. And so being able to prepare for that, to go, okay, so let's look through your numbers. Here's last year, here's this year. Now, we always like to see financial growth for our employees, but I also know that this year flexibility was your top priority. You made that clear multiple times that you had to be gone, 2 days a week to go pick up your kids due to some childcare changes. And I know that was your top priority. What are your thoughts now looking at the numbers? So it's a way of being like, hey, you made less and it's your fault. But you're prefacing that correctly to go, not like, hey, you worked less, so that's why your compensation's less. But flexibility was more important to you this year than compensation was. Are you planning on that being the case this year? Do you see the same flexibility constraints that you have for this year, or is compensation more your focus this year? So it can even refocus somebody that's maybe gone backwards in compensation as well.
Yeah, that's very true. One other example that's not quite, maybe it is, I don't know, but something you had mentioned about somebody, one of your clients and a team member asking for a compensation review. And I thought that was just an interesting conversation. Do you mind sharing that real quick?
I think that's a good one to talk about as well. So this particular employee asked for a performance review, so that my client and I provided that performance feedback, areas for growth, all of that. What she didn't ask for was a compensation review. But in her mind, when she asked for a performance review, she thought that would come with a compensation review.
I.e., she wanted a raise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she wanted you to say, oh, you're doing, probably from her viewpoint, it was like, oh, they think I'm just doing this. Well, look at what all I am doing.
Yep.
Let me make them look at that. And then they're going to say, oh, I should raise you. And then y'all didn't do that. And then she was like, actually, is that?
Yeah. Okay. It was extreme dissatisfaction on her part because she didn't get what she wanted out of that meeting.
So it's back to, again, setting your expectations. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, that theme is what's kind of the underlying theme of this.
It's clear here. Yeah. Her dissatisfaction took me and my client by surprise, because we were like, but wait, she asked for a performance review and that's what we gave her. And this is where clarity to me is so important, because first of all, the employee needed to ask, can I have a compensation review? Or, hey, can I have a performance review? And in that, would we talk about compensation? So again, clarity from the employee's part is important here. But also, my client came into this meeting, he brought this lady on to his team. His practice is young, and she was at the very tippy top of his price range. And he felt like he'd had very clear conversations with her about the fact that she was coming in at the very tippy top of his price range. Now, she doesn't remember the conversations going that way, which is typical. That happens. Time passes and we think we were really clear about something. Most of the time we were not clear about those things. So she made it clear that she was dissatisfied to my client. He and I got together and were like, okay, well, we didn't realize that she wanted a compensation review. And he was surprised because he said, I made it clear that I was bringing her in at the tippy top of my price range and it would take a while to get to a raise because I'm a young practice, etc. And so he's like, I'm surprised that she's, forgetting that piece of information. What do we do with this? She's a valuable employee. I definitely don't want to lose her, but I also don't want her to be dissatisfied. Like, I feel like I'm in between a rock and a hard place. So he and I got together, figured out what we could do from a budget standpoint, which is important. We need to figure out what we can do from a budget standpoint, which we did. But I told him, I want to be very clear, because she's not only at the tippy top of your price range, but from a universal standard. And what I would say, if somebody was hiring a business team member in this area, she's at the tippy top of what I would recommend for any practice. So I said, I know that's uncomfortable, but that's a part of the conversation that we need to have.
I.e., like, if she's thinking, I'm worth so much more, okay, well, you could leave this practice, go somewhere else, and it's highly unlikely you're going to get paid more.
Correct.
Unless you move towns or something like that.
Correct.
Okay. And she may or may not know that. Like,
Most don't. That's the thing, is most don't know. They just think they're going to keep continuing to climb financially year after year the longer that they're in the field. But every position has a ceiling. Every position does.
Well, that's what we talked about in a podcast not too long ago, where it was just like, but what are you, just because you're doing the same job year after year, but you want to get paid more. It's a very touchy and sticky topic. Anyway, sorry.
Yes. So we were able to circle back. My client figured out the amount of raise that he could afford, which was a stretch for him, but he's like, I want to keep her and I don't want her to feel like she's not valued. She's very much valued. So we had a compensation review with her. We talked about what she's making from a whole compensation standpoint. We had talked about how bonus was meant to be a supplement to that. There was some things that were preventing her from hitting that bonus category. We talked about strategy. How can we fix that? Because that was meant to be part of your compensation. So anyway, we had that whole conversation. And then I was able to say, I got to talk about some things that I think are really important to establish in this conversation. And I was just very blunt and said, I want to make sure that leaving this conversation, we're all on the same page. You obviously received an increase. Congratulations. We want you to feel good about that. However, I will say from my consulting perspective, and I'm the one coaching your boss on this, that you're at a level where until you take on a management role, I don't see a lot of room for growth from an hourly pay standpoint. So I want you to know that you are already kind of at the top. He's bumped you up. I want to make sure you know that until that management role comes into play, I don't see a lot of room for growth, and I don't want that to indicate to you that you're not valued.
Yeah. In other words, you need to pick up some more skill sets here. You can't keep doing the same thing you're doing and expect just to get raised just because you're doing that.
And I did take it a step further to let her know, hey, when you are wanting to assume some management roles, when this doctor's ready, because it's still a young practice, he doesn't even have that many team members to manage right now. So it's going to take him a while to get to a point where he needs that and could benefit from that. So, but once you're in that role, just so you know, there's also a ceiling to that. And I want to be very clear with you what that ceiling is, the typical ranges that I see. Because I realized that her pay was intricately tied to how she felt valued. And I didn't want to cross that line again. I didn't want there to be confusion on, oh, I've been a manager now for 2 years and I'm not getting any more increases. I wanted to be clear with her. So all of that's connected to expectations. We were trying to set for her clear expectations going forward. From a dollar amount standpoint, from the fact that her value is not always going to be tied to an increase. Her value could also be tied to affirmations and other ways that we're trying to show appreciation. It can't always be, I didn't get a raise and therefore I'm devalued. So I think that's another important part of this conversation.
And I think that, going back to the first employee I talked about, that's come a long way in that, because she has kind of capped out on the hourly, and yet she's a very driven person. And so I think she also realizes, though, a lot of the other benefits that she gets, and it's not tied to compensation. I think for a long time it was tied to compensation for her as well. And then it took some of her also realizing, okay, I mean, yeah, you could get paid maybe $2 more per hour somewhere else, but what you're giving up is this, and is that worth it to you? And we try all the little things that we try to make it as great a workplace so she does know that she is valued. Other things that I adjust or let her not get away with is not the right word, but things we modify. And, then I got to be careful, because somebody else is like, oh, well, you favor her. And I'm like, I mean, I kind of do. She does all this with a practice, and, I've got to... So it's a sticky place to be, for sure. It's not fun, but I guess the point being, set expectations, and the comp
set your
reviews.
own expectations too. Like, get yourself in the right headspace, and it is one of those things. These working relationships are relationships. No matter how deep that relationship may go or how surface level it stays, you are collaborating with this person on a daily basis. And you mentioned love language earlier. People receive appreciation in different ways. And so if we come into these and we are able to put out on the table the ways that we are trying to show our appreciation for this employee, it may help them. Like with this young lady that I was mentioning, like, she didn't realize the ways that the doctor was trying to show appreciation and value to her. And so sometimes we need those clarifying conversations. If the employee is expecting, oh, well, the only way that you show your appreciation and value is just by all these increases, and we have to come in and go, oh, but I'm really trying to show that I value you in this way, this way, this way. Those are good clarifying conversations, and that can be part of what we need to be mentally prepared for when stepping into these. If we know we've got an employee that's going to push back and question, but why can't I get a raise? And then we need to go in with, these are all the ways I'm trying to show you that I do appreciate you. So being prepared, both emotionally and then with your data as well.
Okay, well, thank you for not punching me in the face for seemingly arguing with you, because that's not what I meant to do. But I'm glad you pointed out to my expectation was wrong going in. You're right, I did reverse. I was like super excited, and I've never been super excited, and I kind of forgot that.
Yeah, well, just got to temper yourself back down now. Get yourself
all
back down in the negative for next year.
I'm down. I'll be skipping them again next year.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.